Always a contender, Furman faces a backcourt rebuild, but boasts perhaps the best front court in the conference. Furman Team Preview starts now. Darren, now I would imagine the sting is still fresh for Bob Richey and the Furman Paladins, losing to Wofford there in the Southern Conference Tournament Championship game, oh so close to getting their second title.
Yeah, I can imagine that is the case. You know, it would have been 2 out of 3 back to the tournament. Certainly a really tough loss for the program. A lot of positives coming out of the year, but there's no doubt, you know, as we've talked about before in other episodes, you know, your goal is to get to the NCAA tournament every year. And there's a sense of almost, whether it's right or wrong, feeling as though you've failed that year if you didn't make the NCAA tournament, especially when you were that close.
That's right. And obviously it's probably stings even more that it was to Wofford. Your rival here in the Greenville-Spartanburg area. So we know what that matchup means just in itself. And then to have a number 6 seed have the run that they had with Wofford and losing to the Terriers right there. Again, it even adds to the magnification of the sting and the hurt and the pain, all of that, and being oh so close. Because during that game, there were several opportunities where it looked like Furman was going to be able to pull away.
Oh, certainly. I completely agree. I mean, it was that game, for whatever reason, had its back and forth moments, but there were multiple times where you felt, hey, if Furman gets a stop here and a bucket, this lead could start to expand to a point where I just don't know if Wofford's got enough to either make a run or do they have the will to make a run. And unfortunately, it looked as though they kind of had Wofford on the ropes late in that game when they went to that 1-3-1 zone. And I will still remember it vividly today. Corey Tripp looks over at Coach Dwight Perry and basically says, What do we do here? Yes. I don't know. That
they were lost for a few moments.
And it was, I think, 2 or 3 straight turnovers. And, you know, one of them is PJay Smith. It was the right play, in my opinion. Fast break, tries to lay the ball in. And Filowich, out of nowhere, pins it off the backboard. And that loosened things up. And Jackson Civils comes down and hits a transition 3. And that just that helped Wofford kind of get out of that tightness. And unfortunately, Furman never recovered from that.
And that was so indicative, that type of play, of what Furman typically does to people, especially when you had the Jalen Slausons of the world and even Garrett Heen to a certain degree, being able to pin a shot off the backboard, transition, you knock down a big 3. That is prototypical of what we've seen from Bob Richey's teams in the past.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're usually Furman being the one on the receiving end of that, the giving end of that, I should say. And uncharacteristic too to give up 90+ points. Yeah, obviously, you know, Furman is a prolific offensive team, but Coach Richey does certainly preach toughness in the defensive side of the ball. And it's not too often that Furman gives up 90+ points, and they certainly gave up 90+ in that game.
Yeah. Now, I did hear you say we. You referred to we. So you still got those Furman ties. I get it, though, man. It's hard to just immediately erase that from your hard drive right there.
Yeah. I had to catch myself there a little bit. No, I love those guys. Obviously, was a part of a special group there for a couple of years, and you know, certainly close to my heart for sure. It's a special place,
and
special
it is
program.
for me too. Obviously, the year that we got to spend together for documenting the entire season there in 2022 and 23 and the championship run and the miracle shot there against Virginia, and just a special season, and getting a different perspective of embedding a film crew with the team the entire season, and had no idea how it was going to finish out. But we did know that there was something about the shot against Chattanooga, where David John Baptiste obviously breaks the heart of all the Furman Paladin fans, all of that. But to be part of that program intimately, like I was, and obviously got to know you at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a culture that is there with Bob Richey. And, I definitely was able to see that and hopefully able to capture that in the 5-episode docuseries called Better Together, Furman's Championship Quest. Yes, this is a selfish plug. Go watch it on Prime Video. You will not be disappointed, or at least I hope you won't be disappointed.
No, you won't.
Because
it's too good.
It was not so much about the putting it together, the production, although I do feel the production level was high quality, but it was really the story. I mean, it was the journey and the characters, the Mike Bothwell, Jalen Slauson, JP Pegues, head coach Bob Richey, and just the unity of that team.
No, but that said, no shameless plug at all. You did a phenomenal job.
Well, it is shameless plug. Yeah, so go watch it.
You did a phenomenal job with that, and I know that we loved having you and the crew around. It made it added a level of interest and a level of fun to that team. And frankly, we had, and I mean this in the best way possible, we had a group of guys and the character that it played well with having cameras around. We had a charismatic crew.
Without a doubt.
But, you do mention the culture piece, and that is something that is very, very important. It's a cliche word in coaching.
It is.
And it is important to just about every coach. But I do think Coach Bob Richey excels in building a culture. And I think that has been illustrated, one, of how hard his guys play for him, but also the program's ability to retain its best players year in and year out.
Yes.
Nobody is perfect when it comes to the portal. Everybody is susceptible to it. And frankly, the better you are, the more likely you are to lose guys, especially at the mid-major level. But it's a credit to Coach Richey and his staff that they've been able to retain a lot of really talented players in years that you wouldn't think that they would retain those guys.
I think it's so understated because it's so easy to say the transfer portal, who can you go get? That's what it seems to be the focus. And I think we miss the focus that it actually is just as important, or maybe more important, that you're able to close the transfer portal in terms of retaining your current players, and especially when you have high level type of players that Bob Richey has been able to have over the years, especially when you're able to develop them. And that's a big part of Bob Richey's template.
Absolutely. I mean, we always talked about work while you wait, right?
Yes.
And, there have been a number of guys that have come through that program that, their freshman, maybe even sophomore year, didn't necessarily play a ton or didn't necessarily put up great numbers, but by their junior and or their senior year were first team all league caliber guys. And it's not easy to do that. It's even harder to do that in the portal era. And he and the staff have still been able to do that. But the player development piece has been very huge for Coach Richey, not only from a talent perspective, but also from a culture and continuity perspective of guys continuously having institutional knowledge of the program and what to expect and the offensive and defensive schemes that they work to execute.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Furman will consistently be a contender in the Southern Conference. There's no doubt. And last year, another 20-plus win season, 25-10, 11-7 in the Southern Conference. Southern Conference finished fifth, and that was somewhat, you're thinking, okay, just were able to claw their way, there in the top six.
Yep.
But this was a season where it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride last year, but they got hot when it mattered most, and they went on that big winning streak.
They did, and it's funny, you mentioned the roller coaster that is not necessarily typical of a Bob Richey program. The note I have here is they were a little bit inconsistent at times in conference play, and that is unlike a Coach Bob Richey team historically, but they just frankly were. They showed moments where they were as good as anybody, and they showed moments where they were pretty vulnerable. And some of that's certainly matchups. I do think last year, probably going into the season, there were probably more question marks maybe than a Coach Richey team had in his tenure at Furman. But they certainly overachieved, in my opinion. And I mean that in a positive way. I think that team really, you could tell, meshed well together and was battle tested. And like you said, they got hot at the right time.
Yeah.
And we've talked about before, when you get tested by playing high level games in the non-conference schedule, you're prepared for those tight moments late in the season, and they came through when they needed to against a very good Chattanooga team in the conference tournament semifinals.
And Coach Richey has told me several times that at the end of the day, especially in the Southern Conference, it comes down to a 3-game season.
Yep.
At the end of the season, and can you put yourself in the best position, as we've talked about previously, being there at one of the top spots in Asheville, and then can you be hot for those 3 games?
Yep. And, one of the things you mentioned is the top 5 seeds. You mentioned Furman sneaking into that top 5. As everybody hopefully knows, or if you don't want to play 4 days in a row.
No, you don't.
If you get those one of the top 5 seeds, you don't have to play on that Thursday. And so the ability to be in the top 5 is a big deal.
Big deal.
And when you can do that, it really does come down to getting hot for those 3 days.
That's right. And Furman, again, consistent all the way around, a solid Ken Palm rating, roughly 140 last year, balanced profile, because they're good in both offense and defense, maybe not elite, except when you start looking at three-point shooting. And this is where Furman just excels, and they have been for years. The offense ranked 6th nationally in three-pointers made per game, 10.9 last year. That's at a high clip.
It is, and that amounted to your point. That amounted to 43 to 45% of their offense last year.
Wow.
So to a degree, they're living and dying by the 3. But when you're shooting it as a team at 36 to 38% for the year, more often than not, you're going to be living by that 3 pretty well.
That's right.
And they just historically have spurt ability too, right? When they can get hot and they can start knocking down 2, 3, 4 threes in a row, 3 points are better than 2. And if you're getting
Yes.
stops, 3 points are certainly better than the 2 that you'd be getting otherwise. You can expand that lead quickly.
That's right. And we know Bob Richey, he's going to push.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to get in transition. He wants to get those threes in the corner, 1-2 pass, and that's it, and go.
Yeah.
And we've seen that consistently. And that's when you look at last season, I think that's what helped them have one of those defining moments, being able to go on that win streak and get hot at the right moment. But then there's also the true defining moment was the loss to Wofford. Maybe not as heartbreakish as the loss to Chattanooga on the shot, but still a point that could that be some motivation? Could that fuel this team? Now, it's a different roster. I do get that, but there's still core components that are there, and we'll talk about that. But you lose the backcourt of PJay Smith and Nick Anderson. And this was just, again, classic Bob Richey bringing in these guards that might have been overlooked.
Yep.
And especially for both Nick and PJay coming from Division II and being able to excel in the Southern Conference.
No, it's funny. Your top backcourt contributors are D2 transfers.
Exactly.
Right? This is the portal era that we're living in.
That's right. Yes.
But you make a really good point, and I think it's an area where he and his staff excel, is trying to maybe think outside the box a little bit and find guys that are overlooked, but again fit the program culture.
Yes.
And can excel the way that Furman wants to play. And I think both PJay Smith and Nick Anderson, for frankly different reasons, really fit that well. PJay Smith, a guy that I was fortunate enough to have the chance to coach for a year, and just a guy that you want on your team with you to go to battle with. He showed up every day.
Yeah.
Had a level of toughness to him. Had developed into a really big shot maker last year, and then Nick Anderson, just uncanny in terms of. He wasn't afraid to put it up, and he wasn't afraid to put it up at any time or any place. And you need that. If you're going to be an elite level shooter that's going to shoot 40+% from the field, or from 3, I should say, you need that. And so those are 2 very big losses for the Furman Paladins.
Yeah, and they were 2 different players because PJay Smith, he walks out on the court and you immediately, your eyes say, okay, that's a hooper. Nick Anderson, he comes out on the court and your first reaction might be, okay, is he even going to get any playing time?
Yeah.
And then you see him start playing. And to your point, how quickly he could get his shot off, and he wasn't afraid to shoot from anywhere, even in transition.
No.
And you quickly understood, okay, that's a player right there, averaged almost 15 points per game for Coach Richey last year.
Yeah.
And we talked about PJay Smith, averaged almost 18 points. And so they accounted for 54% of Furman's production. So that's a big loss, when you look at it from a backcourt perspective.
No, it really is. And to even give Nick Anderson a little bit more praise, he was even better than I think everybody anticipated, from the perspective of he did a whole heck of a lot more for that team last year than just make 3-pointers. Both those guys had a major impact outside of just scoring the basketball on the offensive end too. And so those are certainly big shoes to fill for both those guys.
That's right. And then a mainstay that's been there for years is no longer there. Run out of eligibility, but that's Garrett Heen, I should say. And we know what he was able to do in the NCAA tournament. The 2 free throws he had against Virginia still are so underrated, because JP Pegues doesn't even have that opportunity if it's not for Garrett Heen making those 2 free throws. And this was a guy who was a 50% free throw shooter on the season.
Yeah.
And in that pressure type of situation, able to make those. And so this is a guy who consistently put in 1,000% of effort when he was playing for Bob Richey.
100%. Look, he had a great playing career at Furman.
Yes.
And he's now having a great start to his pro career in Belgium. But I think the biggest thing, that you lose when with Garrett Heen was his presence in the locker room as a stable, steady leader, a guy that you could go to as a teammate, a guy that you could go to as a coach that you could rely on, had a level of maturity that just really helped kind of stabilize things when they would get a little rocky. And frankly, just the type of guy that would give you a shirt off his back. And so he is going to be a significant loss as well as the other 2 that we've mentioned, albeit for a lot of other reasons.
Yeah, and I felt Garrett was a guy, he could be the motivator, the rah-rah type of guy that would get you hyped up in the moment, but also, to your point, be that steady Eddie, like, hey, let's calm down. We're good, especially in the locker room, and being able to put players at ease. And he knew the system.
He did.
I mean, he'd been there for a long time. And again, it goes back to Bob being able to develop guys.
Yep. And you bring up a really good point. He operated out of the pinch, which is the elbow position in Coach Richey's offense, very, very well and very effectively. And to break it down a little bit, in order to run that Chin Princeton style offense well, you have to have a good passing big,
no doubt,
and a big that can process information quickly and frankly really initiate offense and initiate action. And Garrett excelled at that. And so that's a really good point that you make, because I think that, as we'll talk about, they'll be just fine, but that is a loss of somebody who knew the system and could operate the offense.
Yes, that's right. And as you talked about, facilitate the offense, get things going to a certain degree out of that spot. But also, there were times where Garrett could knock down the 3.
Oh, certainly.
And he could be dangerous at times. Now, he didn't have the shooting percentage that I know that he wanted to have, as he finished his career, but he definitely had some moments where he knocked down some big 3-point shots.
No, he certainly did. And particularly the year that the Paladins beat Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
He had some big moments hitting 3-pointers. And last year was more consistent, but was certainly very streaky.
Yes.
But you had to respect him out there, which then hopefully would open up driving lanes for his teammates.
That's right.
He will certainly be missed as well. I mean, those are three key losses for the Paladins as we move into the 26th.
All right, so now turning the attention of some of the nucleus and the newcomers as we look at key returning players here for Furman. And it's easy. We're going to start with Cooper Bowser.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't not start with Cooper Bowser, and just what the potential, you talking about a ceiling. I don't know if we even know what the ceiling is at 6'11" with his wingspan, rim protection. And now it seems like he's developing more on the offensive side. I mean, the sky is the limit for Cooper Bowser.
No, it certainly is. I've actually seen him recently put the ball on the deck and deck it to the rim.
Yeah.
Which, if he somehow can add that to his game on a consistent level, watch out, Southern Conference.
Oh, yeah. SoCon, all defensive player. And if he gets some offense going, you better watch out. Again, he was already efficient scorer, 65% from the field last year. So, again, this guy, again, I don't know if we can put a cap on what his potential is.
No, and I mean, I think that's something that when I was on staff, I mean, we talked about how excited we were for his ability and his ceiling, and a great young man that works hard to get better. But I think he's found a really good way to make sure that he's been involved in the offense, because in theory, he doesn't necessarily fit the prototypical type big man that we talk about, like with Garrett Heen playing out of that pinch. And he's found a really good way to put pressure on the rim offensively, shoot a very high percentage last year. I would imagine that continues to shoot a high efficiency around the rim. But the more he can put pressure on that rim offensively and frankly protect it on the defensive end, he is going to be a real problem in the Southern Conference this year.
And what I've seen early on also, and small sample size, but where I felt there was an area of improvement was just with his hands being able to catch some of those entry passes and grab a hold of some of those rebounds. It seems like he's getting a much better grasp of feel. And again, having that ability, just one simple entry pass into low block right there. And what he can do, you're talking about, if he can take a dribble pivot and go to the rim pretty hard, that's going to be tough to defend.
No, it certainly is. And I think, one thing that's helped him with that is he's put on some weight and he's added a lot of strength. He is certainly thicker, in his upper body than he was when he first came in, which is to be expected. But he has shown an ability to put on weight that I do think has helped with his overall footwork in his hands and his athleticism out on the floor. And he has looked like a different player so far this preseason.
I've got a sneaky suspicion that we're going to see some of those blocks pinned up against the backboard, and he's going to be the reason, and it's going to be out in transition pretty quickly. I promise you. Now, a guy that's going to be hopefully running down that transition and trying to get to that corner three, that's Tom House. Florida State transfer, second year in the program now. This is a guy who, again, he is, in terms of three-point shooting, you talking about getting hot quickly. Whew. I mean, he's a guy, he can be streaky, but if he gets hot, watch out. I've seen some of his games where he just goes on a run and he's unguardable.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, now I can see why he was playing at Florida State and, why he was getting all of that type of attention. And again, seeing some of the games, 26 against Mercer last year, 21 against Samford in the Southern Conference tournament. So again, this guy can turn it on quickly.
Yeah, he can. I mean, that jump shot is real.
Yes.
He has a beautiful, beautiful jump shot.
He's a sniper.
He is a sniper. Gets his feet set very quick.
Yes.
I think one thing that's really a benefit for him is he does have very good size positionally. And so he's able to get his shot off just about anywhere. To your point, you hope to see this year a little bit more consistency. But the crazy thing is he ended up still shooting 41% from three last year. And, I know that he wanted to be shooting the ball better to start the year than he did last year. And he still shot 41%. So,
and it's not low volume.
No.
Yeah.
No, which I think is one way to put this is he shot 41% last year from three and was at times streaky. Yeah. If he can limit some of that, you're talking about a guy that I don't think it's inconceivable could shoot 45% from three.
Yeah. Again, based on what I've seen, how fast he can get his shot off. And again, he has no issues with confidence either. He understands what his role is, and I think that we're going to see some of that. Now, also, what's going to be interesting is I know Bob Richey has talked about looking at the opportunity with his front court And that's now with Charles Johnston playing the 4, putting Cooper Bowser at the 5. And you've got Johnston, another guy, I mean, with the height that he has. And now he would fit more of that Garrett Heen type of role where he can step out and he can knock down that 3. So now you have a front court of Johnston and Cooper Bowser. I mean, that's going to be tough to defend because also as good offensively as Johnston can be, I think there's also some rim protection opportunities with Johnston also on the defensive side.
Yeah, no, there certainly are. And defensively, that front court matches up. I mean, you could put that front court in a Power 4 conference, and that front court matches up with other front courts. That's
size-wise,
very big front court. Obviously, Johnson can really shoot it. And I think he dealt with some nagging injuries last year that didn't allow him to reach his potential of what he wanted to do. And I think he's 100% healthy. And I know he's had a really, really good summer. And, the jump shot has never been an issue for him. So when you're 6'10", 7 feet tall and you can step out like he can and move, he is primed to have a really good year, especially offensively.
And in all reality, he hasn't been playing basketball a long time.
No,
just think
started
about
playing
that.
in COVID.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, just think of what his ceiling can be. Also, now that he's truly understanding, especially at this level, and what he can do. And again, I think from a perspective of what you're putting together with other pieces there, and one of those other guys. And again, you talk about a mainstay. Ben Vanderwall, the ultimate glue guy, and might be the best glue guy in all of the conference.
Oh, he's just a winner. Bottom line, Ben Vanderwall's a winner. I mean, he stepped in as a freshman, and was mature enough to take on a role with that group, and play a pivotal role on an NCAA tournament team as a freshman.
Yeah, he seemed to almost annoy some of the veterans his freshman year because of the effort that he was putting out there. And I wonder, even to a certain degree, and obviously you know a little bit better, but just from a perspective of, did those guys have to up their game because this freshman was coming in and showing them up?
Oh yeah. I mean, there were moments where he was one of the hardest playing guys on the floor, if not the hardest. But we needed that, right? That year, we needed somebody like that to push, and frankly, that dynamic ultimately helped us build better. And we were a more cohesive unit towards the end of the year because of it. But he's a guy that just makes winning plays. You can't look at the box score alone when you take into account Ben Vanderwall.
There's so many things that he does that never show up in the stats, never show up in the box score because there's no place to put on.
Correct. He's going to be one of those guys that he's going to take charges. He's going to find himself in the right spot in a gap to get a dig in, to get a steal, or make a playmaker, make an uncomfortable pass. He'll get it in defensive rebound, offensive rebound. We always talked about it. He's a guy that if you're going to reach your ceiling, he's got to play a prominent role because of the winning plays that he makes. And you just love the guy. You just absolutely love him.
And another guy there that I was thinking was going to get a lot of minutes this year, just from a depth perspective, Davis Molnar. And we were there at the exhibition game against Alabama, and I haven't heard any specific news, but he went down with a apparent knee injury, and it didn't look good.
No.
So that could be a tough situation for Bob's team as far as depth.
Yeah, and you feel for a guy like Davis because he's another guy that's kind of had some nagging injuries over the last couple of years, and he redshirted his freshman year and has dealt with some nagging injuries the last two. Really hoping that it is not an ACL tear. But as you mentioned, it didn't look great yesterday. So, obviously trying to keep the right thoughts with him, but that is certainly a guy that you want to talk about. He's been around the program now. This is his 4th year in the program. He knows the system. And I do think he was primed to step into a pretty consistent rotational role this year. So that will certainly be a loss. I think he was the 8th guy to check in yesterday, maybe the 7th.
I think that's right.
I think he was the 8th guy to check in yesterday. So, appeared to be squarely in the rotation. So now you have to go back and adjust a little bit. Fortunately, obviously it's still early.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt when you've got a guy that's 21, going to be 22 years old, and you probably have to pivot to someone who's 18 or 19 years old, you're going to lose more than just institutional knowledge there as well.
No doubt. And then Edrin Bronson, point guard there. This is another guy who's been in the program. Was this going to be his breakout year? We saw some flashes, 14 points against Kansas, had 15 points in the loss in the NIT first round against North Texas. Again, I think a strong defender. Was he going to be able to take that next step on the offensive side? And I'm going to tell you, he's going to get pushed. Yeah. Freshman coming in, Alex Wilkins is going to be a potential star here in the Southern Conference. And what a big win for Bob Richey being able to sign Alex Wilkins.
My gosh, yeah, he looks to be all of the real deal. Plays with a certain level of confidence that is just not that of a freshman. We talk about yesterday, comes out and first possession knocks down a three. First bucket, New Timmons, first bucket against Alabama, first bucket of his career. And, didn't think twice about it. No, didn't blink an eye. And one thing I noticed is he was coming back down the floor. One of the Alabama players was kind of running down the middle of the lane, and in a very legal manner, kind of checked him. And I just kind of was like, all right, like this kid's got some toughness to him here. There's just kind of an aura about him. So I definitely think he will push Edrin. Now that said, Edrin Bronson's not going to back down.
No, he's not.
I
think it's great to have this type of competition.
100%. 100%. He's a guy, had a good year last year. I think ideally you want to see him take another big leap this year. But I think if Furman wants to cut down the nets in Asheville, Bronson's going to have to play a major role in the success of this team.
That's right. All right. Another key transfer, Asa Thomas from Clemson, 6'7" shooter. Again, I think this guy adds some wing depth and scoring potential. We saw some of that already early on. And so that's a big pickup because I think there's an opportunity. This guy has the talent to play at that high major type of level. Injuries sidelined him there at Clemson, just was never able to kind of get into that rotation, so to speak. But now here with Furman, I think he has an opportunity to really add some depth.
I agree. I think this is a really good get for Coach Richey and the Paladins. He's got very good size at 6'7". The stroke is real. I think if you would talk to anybody at Clemson, they would tell you as well. I'm sure you probably already, you probably have.
Oh, yeah.
The stroke is real. And so I think, there are some similarities to him and Nick Anderson in terms of their ability to, I think, get their shot up from just about anywhere. Now, I'm not trying to compare the two players because they are certainly different size-wise and otherwise. But Asa certainly has a very quick release, appears unafraid to put it up. And with his size, I do think is going to be able to put it on the floor and be able to at least be a straight line driver, whether he's creating for himself or creating another opportunity in Coach Richey's offense.
Yeah, and you might have to go pull him off the golf course over there at Furman because he's a good golfer too.
Man, I didn't know that.
I do know that, yes.
Okay.
Exactly so. There is something there. All right, and then also what you have to look at is what Bob has been able to do just with this freshman class, because this is a really good freshman class led by Alex Wilkins, but there's others.
No, there certainly are, and I think it was an approach that he wanted to take was, hey, everybody is always only really going to the portal. You know what? Let's go out recruit. Frankly, a lot of these guys are going under recruited because a lot of schools aren't recruiting freshmen now, some explicitly and some implicitly. But he said, look, let's go get some really good, talented freshmen. We're going to stick to our culture of player development, work while you wait, build. And man, he appears to have hit on a number of freshmen, and there were multiple freshmen that played significant minutes and made meaningful impacts yesterday in that game against Alabama.
Yeah, they definitely did. All right, and so for Coach Richey also, when you look at this season, he's pivoting from a guard-heavy opportunity, and I think looking at what can they do with this front court when you've got Cooper Bowser, when you've got Charles Johnston, and can you have the post ups and then kick it out to Thomas and House, out there on the wing, and how will Bronson and how will Wilkins incorporate themselves, running the point, and then you've got Vanderwall. He's out there facilitating. Somehow he's going to get his touches. He's going to get the team running in the offense.
The ultimate Swiss Army knife.
Yes,
exactly. Like all jokes aside. Now, I think what will be interesting is the differences between a Bowser and a Johnston. It will be really interesting to see what Coach Richey dials up offensively, because I think where Bowser's at his best is when you can get him in ball screen action and you can get him out of rolls where he's rolling hard to the rim. That's where I think he's going to be at his best. Now, to your point, I think he's going to have to be able to have some success back to the basket, not only to score himself, but also to initiate action with some of his teammates with some of the stuff that Coach Richey will want to do. But I think this group in particular, there are some really unique fits in a good way, but that I think will cause, Coach Richey will have to dial up some stuff that will put these guys in situations to make them more successful.
And that's the area of concern, is what that gap will be in terms of the drop off once you do have to go to the bench and utilize some of that depth. And so that will be interesting, because we know Bowser, preseason all conference, we understand that he could definitely easily be the defensive player of the year in the Southern Conference. There's no question. Vanderwall's that glue guy that we talked about, and Johnston playing the 4. That could be an X factor here in that offense. And then obviously you have the snipers there, as we mentioned, with House and Thomas. And again, watch out for Alex Wilkins.
Ooh, yes.
I'm telling you.
Remember that name.
Remember that name for certain. All right, when you look at their schedule, non-conference wise, though, again, I love this. The opening day marathon, Field of 68 opening day marathon, I should say, just right around the corner. November the 3rd against High Point. I think it's a great opportunity to start the season. And then you also just look at some of the other games that they have. I think this is a schedule that Bob has really thought through. And I know, again, scheduling's tough, but you got Troy, you've got at Northern Iowa, you've got Queens. You go down to Florida for the Terry's Chocolate ESPN Events Invitational, playing Richmond, and then you're either going to play Charlotte or Illinois State. So you have some great matchup opportunities.
No, you certainly do. Kind of going in backwards order there. Obviously, a couple things have to happen to get to Illinois State, but that could be one heck of a mid-major matchup. Illinois State is primed to be very good this year. They should have a very good chance to win the Missouri Valley Conference. A lot of talent there. So that could be one heck of a game and one heck of a challenge for the Paladins. Northern Iowa, another Missouri Valley opponent. I've had the opportunity to go to Northern Iowa and coach, and that can be a tough place to win a ball game at. They appreciate their basketball there. They're very well coached. They're typically big and strong and physical. They will play a different style than Furman. And so that could be a very good challenge as well. Fortunately, they're getting there before it gets too cold.
That's right.
Cedar Rapids, Iowa can get, it was like 30 below when we were there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I don't need that.
No,
I don't need that.
We actually, when we were there, I was at Indiana State, and this is worth telling the abridged version real quick. So we're at Indiana State, and it's the first full season back after COVID. So it's 21-22, and there were still a bunch of COVID protocols. Well, we had COVID run through our team, and we had two staff members that weren't vaccinated. And so the protocol was if you obviously had COVID, you had to be away from the team. And if you were not vaccinated, even though you didn't have it, but you were exposed because you were near the team, you had to be away from the team for a certain amount of days. So the long and the short of it is we had a Northern Iowa and Drake back to back. Well, we were able to postpone the Drake game, but we flew up to Northern Iowa with 7 guys and we were missing 2 staff members. I mean, this bench looked like an AAU
empty
bench.
Yes.
I mean, it was unbelievable. It was empty. And mind you, we had former SoCon Player of the Year, Kamari Peterson, on our roster, who did not actually play too much as a freshman. And so we basically played 5 guys, and we ended up having to use the 2 guys on the bench, but they were both, frankly, guys that didn't play a ton. Well, guess what? Northern Iowa was pretty good that year. They had AJ Green, who's now playing in the NBA, among a couple other guys. We had them down by like 17. We end up running out of gas. AJ Green hits a shot to tie it up that hits every part of the rim with about 5 seconds left. We miss a game winner and we lose in overtime. But it was the most wild game I've ever coached at the college level because we literally had, I think, 10 people with us.
It's sports. You just never know how it's going to play out. Again, it can look great on paper. We get all of that. But until the players get out there and play, then that's when you understand the craziness and the chaos that can happen. Also, all right, we've got Harvard coming into Greenville in December. And then also Bob's going to be taking the team up to Manhattan right around Christmas. And then they open up with Mercer and conference slate on December the 31st. All right, so here's the big question for Furman. We know they lost over half their three-pointers made with backcourt departure. And so can Bob Richey, can he successfully shift to this inside-out type of offense and be able to utilize that front court and some of the guys that he's got in that backcourt?
I'm biased, obviously.
Yes.
But I genuinely do. I just think he is a master of being able to manipulate offense so that it fits the personnel that he has. And I think Charles Johnston is going to have a really big year. And it's going to really provide a nice inside-out matchup problem between him and Bowser. And I think that they have the perimeter shooting that is returning and that has been brought in to make up for what has lost. Now, that's a lot that, we talked about 54% of their points. That's a lot. And both the two main losses in the backcourt shot 40+% from three. But I do believe that Coach Richey's track record has illustrated that he can, we talk about this when we talked about Chattanooga. He can rinse and repeat.
Oh, yes.
And
he's got a template.
Plug and play. And he's got a template that frankly really works. And so I think that this has the opportunity to be a really special group, and certainly 1 through 7. Yeah. Really, really tough.
What's the floor?
I genuinely think that the floor is probably 2 or 3. I just don't see. I think that this team, combined with Coach Richey's acumen, understanding of this conference, and ability, I don't see this team really finishing anything worse than second or third.
Yeah, I would say third would be the floor, and that would be an injury occurs or you have a point guard that's not able to step up offensively, or your perimeter shooting is in a slump, for a period of time, something of that nature. But it's hard for me to see Furman falling past third. And the coaches, they say number 2. Yeah. And they did receive some first place votes also. Ceiling for Furman. I think this is another easy one. Yeah. We know what the ceiling would be. Yeah. This is a championship type of team.
Certainly.
NCAA tournament bound. Defense in the front court, they're championship caliber. Yeah. We know that.
Yeah, no, and I think one thing that makes this team really intriguing is that if that front court is as good as we think it is, and they get production out of that backcourt, I think 2 things are true. One, it's a very scary team to score on at the rim overall, which is going to put a lot of pressure on teams from the perimeter. And 2, if they are able to reach that ceiling and they do get to the NCAA tournament and their front court can match up against an opponent's front court, a lot of times, not all the time, we're generalizing, but a lot of times the difference between some of these really good mid-majors and some of the high majors is usually not the backcourt. It's usually a lot of times the guys up front. And this front court has the potential to be very, very good. Again, it sounds like a broken record. It sounds like cliche, but the ceiling for this team could be a really scary first round matchup for somebody if they're able to win the Southern Conference tournament in Nashville.
No question about it. And I think also what we might have forgotten about last year, which might be different this year for Furman, is remember, they didn't have games at Timmons because it was the renovation. So they were playing home games here basically in Greenville at the Bon Secours Wellness Arena, the Well. And I think now with a fully renovated Timmons Arena. The place is absolutely
incredible.
Spectacular. Jason Donnelly, athletic director, Elizabeth Davis, the president, everybody there involved has done a phenomenal job putting that together. Is a true basketball arena, and it feels great. The size is just what you want for this type of level, mid-major here in the Southern Conference. So I think that could be another important piece to this as far as giving them true home court advantage and how that can propel them there in the Southern Conference. All right, so that's the Furman preview episode. Make sure you subscribe, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, even the iHeartRadio app. Make sure you check all of that out. Easy. Just press that subscribe button. You can do it. Until next time, may all your jumpers hit nothing but the bottom of the net.